Good now to you, whenever and wherever this finds you. Tonight, I want to talk about citizen assembly. The video that I have is from Ireland, and I think this was recorded in 2019, and it's about Louise, who's just an ordinary citizen, mother of three, and she is the spokesperson in this panel to speak about citizen assembly. So let's see what she has to say.
Okay, hi everybody, my name's Louise and I've come from Dublin in Ireland to share my experience. So my experience is quite different than everybody on the panel. I was one of the randomly selected assembly members on the Irish Citizens Assembly that took part from 2016 to 2017. I answered a knock on my door one day and there was a guy there just with a clipboard and he was asking me questions and said, would you like to take part in this assembly? I really had no idea what he was talking about. I've no political background, no real engagement in anything political or social to much extent in my life. I should say that it was August and I had been at home for 2 full months with my 3 children, and this man was standing on my doorstep offering to bring me to a hotel once a month to talk to grown-ups about grown-up things. So I said, yes, okay, I don't care what it is, I'm going. Don't tell everyone that, I know it's been live streamed, but there you go. I want to say that I did it for the civic, but sometimes you just have to get the carrot to get in the door, and then I was hooked once I was in. That's the true story. So that's how I got involved. Basically, there was no other way about it. That's how I got involved, and we started in October 2016, and we ended our deliberations on our first topic in May 2017. As a direct result of our recommendations, the government set up a parliamentary committee which basically went through a mini citizens assembly. They had their own version of it, just an abridged version. And then the country went to a referendum and we saw basically within a percentage point that the country voted exactly as 100 citizens had voted to change the abortion laws in Ireland. So it was fascinating to see that, given that once we had made our recommendations and published them, there was widespread shock, awe, horror. Oh my God, this has gone too far, this will never pass. But it did, it really did. And the deliberations that we had, I suppose, paved the way for the rhetoric and for the discussion and for the talking points to change, because a topic like abortion is obviously very polarizing a topic. So we had in the media, we had very much a strong yes and we had very much a strong no, and the sense was through the assembly process that really there was the black and the white, but the vast majority of people sat in this wide grey area in the middle. And what the Citizens Assembly allowed to come about was for time and space to be given to that grey area, to allow people to discuss, to allow people to hear from experts, and to allow people to give some deep thought and deep, attention to a topic. And it's not the only topic we discussed. At the end of that set of recommendations, we moved on to our climate change recommendations, which are now coming up for the parliamentary committee going on at the moment in relation to how we're going to take up some of those recommendations. But I'll end by saying that it's very important to get to the point where we have more day-to-day people involved in large decisions. The assumption is that, my opinion doesn't really matter. What would I know about that? How would I be able to affect any change? But I believe if there is a mechanism there and there is a process available, that people will engage with it if they are asked. But you have to ask people to get involved. And I think that what we're seeing in Ireland now, and we've just called now what will be our 3rd Citizens Assembly. So the first one there was a bunch of recommendations, but we had our marriage equality referendum out of that. So we were the first country to put into law, constitutional right to same-sex marriage. That was in 2015. 2018, we had the abortion referendum. We're now having a citizens' assembly has just been called for two topics. One is for gender equality, and the second one is actually a more local one, which is our first time to do something local. We've always gone big. Now we're trying to get a little bit more micro on it. So it's around the Dublin City Council and how the City Council is run, which is new. So that was really all I wanted to say, is that, as much as possible, the more that these types of initiatives can reach a variety of people from all walks of life, the more benefit for everybody, because everybody has something to offer. Everybody, from the truck driver to the person who's a CEO of a very large firm. I've seen it in roundtable discussions in a hotel, week in, week out. Everybody had something to contribute, and that's what needs to be heard.
Yes, everyone has something to add, but how are the people selected to be on the citizen jury? The question comes in from the audience.
And I have a question for Louise about the citizen assembly. And I was particularly curious about how the random selection process works, and wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that.
So it was stratified random selection. So it was basically every fourth house, the chap was knocking on the door. Now, if you understand where I live in the middle of nowhere, so it's quite unusual that anybody would ever knock on my door. So that was it. He had his demographics, he had his stratified. He was trying to fill his. He asked me a bunch of questions at the start. Age, background, whatever. He was trying to categorize me to see if he needed one of me, and turned out he did, and so that's how it worked. He worked for a private polling company, so it went out to tender. The government put it out to tender to a polling company who would often go around and do kind of market research type polls. So it was a guy from that company. Yeah.
So we know now what a citizen assembly is. We know how you're selected. But how does it really work? And are there any benefits that were unexpected or come from such a process?
So just to speak a little bit about within the Citizens Assembly that I was a part of, it was very important for us as a group, and each weekend we had a different table and a different group. We were intentionally mixed every time. So a very important part of our method of operation was our code of conduct and the facilitation at the tables. So without strong facilitators at each table, you better be really careful, because some people can take over the conversation, and that can be very demotivating for others. So from just a day-to-day part, it's very important to have really good facilitators. What was interesting for me personally that happened outside of the Citizens Assembly was the skills that you learn as part of a group like an assembly. Those are skills that you're going to have for the rest of your life. They are skills that you're mirroring from others, you're learning from watching others. It's just from being in the room, you're seeing how to have very difficult conversations, how to find common ground, how to ask questions. Now, obviously one of the topics that we were talking about was really personal and a very difficult topic, and I thought maybe that was why we were all being so polite and nobody was really kind of saying what they felt, or and I genuinely thought, okay, that's why this is like this. But it was actually the same for all the other topics. The tone was set where people were just curious. There was an atmosphere of curiosity, and there was also an atmosphere of people took this very seriously. They took it very seriously. They thought, I've been asked to do this really important job, and I'm going to take it really seriously, and I'm going to do my best. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to try to understand all this crazy stuff that these absolute PhD head people are saying to me, and I have no idea what they're saying. And you're trying to make sense of people who have 10 years of academic learning and deep knowledge on a subject, and you're just coming in off the street and you have no idea about some of these topics at all, and you're trying your best to listen to that, to try to contextualize it, to try and discuss it, to try and piece it apart, and then to try and say, right, well, what can we do next that's going to be impactful, that's going to make a change, that's going to be meaningful? Because the worst thing you can do in a situation like that is to make recommendations that are going to be defunct, almost immediately. You want to be thinking about, right, what's the current situation, but what's the future situation? And can we do things now that are going to prevent us being in this, situation down the line? So it's really to try and put your future head on as well. So the skills that you learn, and you also then, you become motivated, not just politically, but socially. So it mobilized a lot of women that had never even considered politics or social engagement on any level. So, if you can get people to engage with the process, from the next step, you don't know, you have a little champion and they're going to go off and they're going to create all sorts of conversations with people, and they're going to educate each other, and everybody brings each other along the way.
So it does turn out that there's a lot more to this citizen assembly than just creating law. And now, one of the things I was thinking was 9 months, that's a long time, and yet then they had to have another process, and then they voted. So that was a long process. But think about it. That issue is buried. It's done. It's agreed to. It's put to rest. There's no more using that for political gain. There's no more divisiveness. It's not a wedge issue anymore. So I think that a citizen assembly could be used for many, many things. And we can start at the local level. And I would say, I had my friend Sass tell me that one of the first things they would look at is the homeless problem. And what do you do with the unhoused? Speaking of Sass, he was running for Congress, and now he's thinking about running for city council. But I asked him, regardless of what he does, if he won't push for the citizen assembly. So he's young, he's intelligent, he's got a lot of really good ideas, and I think that he would be a good spokesman for this. So I encourage everyone to get on board, and let's see what we got to do to get a citizens assembly.